Hi. In today's presentation, we're going to be talking about the ISU novel Looking for Jane by Heather Marshall. In this presentation, I'm going to be talking about the main characters, a book summary, a book conclusion, the author's message, and a personal connection. So, to start off this presentation, I have a quick question. What would you do if the law told you you don't have any control over your body? Would you stay silent, or would you fight back? In Looking for Jane, Heather Marshall tells a story in the perspective of other women who risk their lives to give others a choice. Let's start off by introducing one of the main characters. Evelyn Taylor was once sent to a home for unwed mothers, but many years later was one of the founding members of the Jane Network, an underground abortion service. During her time in the Jane Network, Evelyn dedicated her time to make sure that women received safe and compassionate reproductive care. In the book, her character represents courage and the will to fight for women's rights. The second character I'll be introducing is Nancy Mitchell. Nancy Mitchell is a young woman from Toronto in the early 1960s who unexpectedly became pregnant in a time where unwed mothers was a big stigma and abortions were very illegal. Nancy's story exposes the real trauma and the unjust her and many women faced during this time. A lot of these women were forced to give up their babies, whether it was through adoption or through abortion. Now we're going to be introducing Angela. For me, I think I like Angela the most out of the three main characters I'll be talking about in this presentation, just because I feel if it wasn't for her, then the storyline wouldn't really connect. Personally, I think that the only reason why Nancy and Evelyn are so tied together by the end of the book is because Angela was so curious and dedicated to figure out what this letter meant, which really tied everything together. Angela was like a bridge that connected the past and the present together. This also really shows how the struggles and sacrifices from the past generations continue to shape the present generations. Now let's get into the book summary. One day in the early 60s, Evelyn Taylor's parents sent her to a home for wedlock females because Evelyn's fiancé had passed away. Not wanting to disappoint anyone, Evelyn obviously went to the house to make sure that her parents were satisfied with her. Evelyn didn't know what she was up against until later walking into the house. She was greeted by a nun and was shown to her room where she would spend the next 9 months of her life. Now, you have to picture this. In this house, you weren't allowed to tell anyone your full name. You weren't allowed to tell anyone any secrets about yourself, anything personal. You're not allowed to make any friends, nothing. You had to be, isolated. So imagine the pain and the depression that Evelyn went through while pregnant. Later on in the chapters, Evelyn does end up making a secret friend, but she had to keep her secret friend a secret from everyone else. So you can just imagine the pain that she was going through. So after Evelyn gives birth to her child, her time at St. Agnes is over. Many years later, after she leaves the home, she gets her medical degree. During the time she gets her medical degree, she learns about the Jane Network. After learning more about the Jane Network, she becomes a really big contribution to this network. While working for the Janes, Evelyn meets a young girl named Nancy. Nancy had unexpectedly got pregnant by her past boyfriend. Many years after Nancy gets her abortion, she turns to the same organization, the Jane Network, and starts working for them too. Nancy becomes very deeply involved in the mission. Decades and decades later, Angela is working in her store and she's clearing out some old dressers. While clearing out a specific dresser, she finds a letter. During the time she found the letter, Angela was trying to figure out her own history and where she truly came from because she was adopted. Angela felt guilty that the person that was supposed to receive the letter never got the letter, so she dedicated some time into figuring out who the letter was for to make sure that they got it. Angela finds out that the letter is sent from Home for Wedlock Mothers, St. Agnes. She makes the connection that Dr. Evelyn Taylor was also a wedlock mother from St. Agnes, so she gets into contact with her. Now, Evelyn Taylor and Nancy Mitchell are trying to work together to figure out who this letter was addressed to and who was from. At the end of the chapters, we can start to make some connections, and we do learn that Evelyn Taylor changed her name after she moved out of St. Agnes just because she couldn't take the pain of her name anymore, and she switched it to her secret friend's name, which she unfortunately committed suicide. And then later on, she finds out that the child that was taken from her at the home was, in fact, Nancy. As you can see in this slide, I have made a drawing of my perspective of what I think St. Agnes looks like, just because of the description and the way that Evelyn felt in the home. I felt like it was a really depressing and sad environment, and somewhere that no one would ever want to go to. The vibes that I got were that it was always raining outside, and at the gates that entered you into St. Agnes was big black metal bars, and there was vines coming down all over it. Now we're going to get into the literary devices. So the first literary device that I have written down is plot, just because in the beginning of the book, Evelyn's baby was taken from her from St. Agnes just because she was an unwed mother. And then at the end of the book, Evelyn becomes a doctor who helps women get safe abortions. I found this plot interesting just because after all that time of being controlled and taking something so precious from you, I would assume that she would want to keep her life secret and not want to help anyone else. The second device I took notes off of was setting. St. Agnes is a very sad, depressing, and very energy-consuming environment. In this environment, you can just see how it represents the dehumanization of patriarchal systems. Due to the expectations from society and the regime thinking that they have control over women and their choices and their pregnancies. Now, my favorite part of this presentation are the quotes that I used. I'm going to get into 3 pretty important quotes that I think made a pretty big impact on the presentation. The quote states, "The doctor actually smiles at Evelyn over the top of the sheets. A baby girl. You're going to make some nice couple very happy, Evelyn." So the message that I got when reading this quote was that the doctor found it more important to care about the reaction that the couple is going to get when they figure out the gender of the baby, rather than making sure that Evelyn, who had just given birth, was safe and okay and comfortable. The reason I think this is because Evelyn is not giving St. Agnes anything, but the couple that is getting the baby is paying them. Now for my second quote, I'm going to be using one from Nancy's chapters. It says, "I shouldn't have to track you down like I did, like abortion is some black market luxury." For some context, Nancy is basically just thanking Evelyn for helping her abort her child and keeping it a secret. This quote just truly reveals how women have to seek reproductive health care in the shadows. Sometimes it can be unsafe, and sometimes if you're very lucky like Nancy was, it can be safe. It kind of just really highlights how abortion should be a basic human right, not something women should be hunting down in secret, hiding from people, making sure nobody knows of it. Now, my final quote is going to be from Father Leceric. He says, "You must always accept God's will, fully and truly and without question. Remember that you can, clearly, conceive and bear children at a later time in your lives. Once you are married in the eyes of God, you can conceive again and bear legitimate children for your husbands." When I read this quote in the chapter, I was just so fascinated that this is the mindset of some people, just because he is really believing the idea that children aren't real. They're not actual living things unless their parents are married, unless the the love or the binding between them is seen by God, which is only seen through marriage. So this is basically where she got all of her information and knowledge to create the book Looking for Jane. Heather Marshall says that the reasoning for writing this book was to give a voice for all those females who were forgotten about, and to remind everyone that behind every law and policy is a human being. I think that inequality in Canada deeply connects to the book Looking for Jane, regarding how society treats pregnant women differently based on their marital status. It's very clear in the book that women that are not married and have children are treated pretty poorly, and we can see that through Evelyn's experience. Evelyn's experience really does open up my eyes. It helps me see clearly through how women were treated in the past and sometimes even in the present today. Evelyn was basically just used for her body to conceive a child just because she wasn't married when she got pregnant. But society is just so two-faced, because even if a female is married, she still has these high expectations in life. For example, they have to go above and beyond and meet traditional family roles, like making food for the family, cleaning the house, raising the children, agreeing to whatever your husband says, saying yes to everything and stuff like that. But then when a female that's not married has a child, they go through even harsher expectations, like, why aren't you married? Why are you pregnant? Are you just sleeping around? Are you having kids without even thinking about your actions? And just very harsh situations. Unwed mothers were frequently sent to maternity homes, expected to give up their babies as if there's no emotional connection to it. I think that the narrative in the story and Evelyn's experience really helped me realize what kind of society we live in today. Because even today, people are fighting over whether or not women should have the right for abortion, which has an even harsher outcome to it. I think that if we, as a society, just come to a conclusion that everyone has the right to their own choices, basically, it would ensure a safe and accepting environment for everyone. Why should women sacrifice their lives just to find a safe and healthy clinic or area to get an abortion? I think that if we recognize the true history from our past and our present, then we can work together in making a society that truly values women's rights all in total. To conclude the presentation, I would 100% recommend Looking for Jane by Heather Marshall to someone who has never read it, just because for me, it really opened up my eyes and opened up my perspective on this topic, and I think that it could really help other people understand more about the topic if they have no information on it already. To me, when I was reading the chapters, the characters felt real. The characters felt connected to me, I think, just because it's on a point of view from a female, and as a female reading the book, I felt more connected to it. I would 100% give this book a 5 out of 5. It had a really powerful and meaningful message to it, and you could just tell from the beginning of the chapters that the book had a purpose, and it wasn't just there to entertain the reader. So that concludes my whole presentation. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.